It's hard to believe, but this is my 300th video on this channel, and so I want to thank everybody for paying attention enough and clicking on enough videos for that to be able to happen. I'm going to get to the pros and cons, why you probably clicked on this video, in a second, but before that I'm going to talk about the channel just a little bit. So if you want to skip ahead to the pros and cons, go right here. Every 100th video so far I've done something, I don't know, unique or different. The first time I did a highlight video, the first 100 videos, that's when very few people were watching. And then the 200th video, I did a little Q&A for the first time. And yeah, so this one we're gonna make this pros and cons of living in Kansas. A little bit different kind of a video as well. But just wanna thank everybody once again for coming along this journey of exploring small towns and rural areas. Mostly in the middle of the country, but starting to expand to different places. I think by the 400th video there'll be some changes you'll see on the channel. Not quite ready to announce all those yet, but sign up for my newsletter. I every once in a while put out a newsletter, and I put out information about what I'm working on there. But I think later this summer you'll see some interesting things. I'm going to some really cool places later this year, and so definitely very excited about that. And it's been fun. It's been a very busy time lately. Here in April and May is the busiest time I have as a track coach. This is represent my high school track team here, but Wichita State Track and Field is super busy, so that's why you've seen maybe some more local videos in Kansas and Wichita, things like that. And hopefully I can continue to get a couple videos out per week until the summertime hits and I'll have some time to breathe and get out and explore a little bit more. So with that being said, let's check out the pros and cons list of living in Kansas. I'm here on the Arkansas River. We're going to take a walk down the river. There's a nice park in this area, and so we'll start here and I'll list my pros and cons of living in Kansas as we walk along the river with our destination of Keeper of the Plains. And so this is a pros and cons list that it might be a pro or a con depending on what the subject matter is. So I'll talk through those things, and this isn't an totally exhaustive list, so I'm sure there's going to be things that you'll think of that aren't on this list. So put them in the comments and let me know what you like or dislike about living in Kansas. The weather in Kansas can get a little crazy at times, and I'm putting this as a pro or a con because I did not grow up in Kansas, and I grew up in Ohio in a place that was a lot cloudier. Kansas is generally a more sunny place, although if you're only familiar with living in Kansas, you might not realize that. Actually, parts of Kansas are some of the sunniest places in the entire United States, but on the other side of that, Kansas is also one of the windiest places and has some of the biggest extremes from hot to cold there are anywhere in the country. It can easily be over 100 degrees, 110 degrees even in the summer. And then while the temperature probably doesn't go as low as some of the northern states, a strong wind and a low temperature, especially if the wind is from the north, can make it really, really uncomfortable in Kansas. So Kansas's weather for me is probably better than where I grew up in Ohio, but certainly it's not for everybody. Cost of living in Kansas is very low in comparison to the rest of the country, so this is definitely a pro. Now, there will be people that would say that there's a reason why that it's inexpensive to live here, and we'll get to that in another topic. But it is inexpensive to live in Kansas for the most part. There are places in Kansas City that are more expensive, and up in northeastern Kansas and maybe parts of near Wichita, although I live in Wichita and it's a pretty inexpensive place to live in comparison to other cities of its size in the United States. There is a lot of economic development. It's one of the top 10 states in terms of infrastructure in the United States. Energy and internet access are very high in the state of Kansas, so you get a lot of bang for the buck living in Kansas. And relating to that last topic, having a relaxed pace of life might be a positive or a negative depending on who you are and what place in life that you are. So if you're you have a family and you're trying to save money, and raising a family is expensive, buying a house, all those kind of things. So the low cost of living in a more safe area is probably a positive. There's not going to be a lot of traffic in Kansas, except for maybe in the Kansas City area. Even in Wichita, the traffic is not too bad. But there's not as much nightlife. There's not big cities. There's not, as much in like professional sports. Although Kansas City obviously has the Chiefs and the Royals, there are more minor league sports and universities in Kansas that are the entertainment in that level. But but it is definitely more laid back pace of life in Kansas. People might not realize there are lots of outdoor activities in Kansas. It's very wide open, and when you have wide open and rural places, you're going to have a lot of nice places to go on an adventure. The Flint Hills are an amazing area to go explore, and as you get out to the western parts of Kansas that's close to Colorado, there's some places that you wouldn't think of when you think of Kansas. People think of it as being flat, but there's definitely some really cool places, natural kind of geological formations, and great places to spend a day or a weekend or even a week exploring. One of the first things I noticed when I moved to Kansas was how friendly the people were. Certainly anywhere you go, you're going to find jerks. And Kansas has some jerks here and there, but for the most part, people are very, very friendly. Kansas is known for hospitality, and anywhere you go, people are proud of their communities. And so definitely a positive is the friendly people of Kansas. Unfortunately, one of the negatives in Kansas is, there's a lot of miles between cities and even towns that, are a decent size where there might be healthcare facilities. So that's something that, if you're maybe have certain health issues or of a certain age, could be difficult to get to. So definitely one of the few negatives I found about living in Kansas. Kansas ranks near the bottom of the United States in public lands. And so if you're a person that likes to go out and explore and kind of be on what's called the Bureau of Land Management, BLM lands that you see out in the West, there's so many of those. There's very little of that in Kansas. Kansas is known for its barbecue, but there's also lots of other great places to eat. I can tell you from experience, I've put on a few pounds since I moved here 18 years ago. And definitely you will find barbecue places all over the state. It's one of those kind of places like Texas and other areas of the Midwest that's known for their barbecue, and it's definitely very good. Lots of great places to eat in Kansas. There's very little public transportation in Kansas outside of probably Kansas City and a little bit of Wichita. Living in Wichita, I know there's not a ton of public transportation even in the city here. But once you get, 2/3 of the state, which is very rural, you're not going to find hardly any public transportation. So you're going to need a car or a truck or some sort of vehicle to get you around. You might be surprised to find that Kansas has some terrific golf courses, some of the most highly ranked courses in the entire United States. And they're not just in the Kansas City or Wichita area. There's some more out in the western parts of Kansas that have very small population to support it. So if you like golf, Kansas is definitely another good place to go. You might have to deal with some of that wind, but really beautiful areas to play golf. Some people love living in the city or love exploring the big cities, and I definitely do too. But Kansas has tons of small towns, and that typical Midwestern charm is in many, many of these small towns. So if you like getting out and seeing places that have less than 1,000 people living in them, that have historic buildings and kind of taking you back in time, Kansas is definitely a place for you. Most people are going to think ghost towns are a negative. Obviously, I don't think of it that way. Certainly, I wish those towns succeeded, but I love the fact that there's a lot of history to learn about Kansas through ghost towns. And there's so many, there's hundreds and hundreds of ghost towns in Kansas because of where it was located geographically. People were heading west, they were trying to start new lives. They would start a community hoping that the railroad would pass through their community, and then if it didn't, they were pretty much had to up and leave the town to go to a place near the railroad because there weren't roads, and it was hard to get around back in the 1800s when Kansas was starting to to become populated, and it was on the way to the west. People were heading to maybe Oregon, or people were heading to California, and Kansas was the kind of first state along the way, and a lot of people just decided to see if they could survive in Kansas. So lots of ghost towns. You can watch those, videos on my channel, and I'm sure I'll be trying to find more and more throughout the rest of this year. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I was walking here towards the Keeper of the Plains. This is kind of the main landmark in Wichita. A lot of places to visit in Wichita, but this is definitely a popular one. This was erected in 1974 by the Kiowa Comanche artist Black Bear Boson, donated to the city of Wichita. This is right near where the Wichita Indians were in the 1800s and what the city of Wichita was named after. So pretty cool historical feature here. These little round black fire pits are lit up each night. So what did you think of this list? Let me know in the comments, and once again, thanks for watching.